So hello, everyone. Thank you for continuing to hang on with us throughout the day for our Illinois LGBTQ Business Roundtable. This session is our Advocacy 101, where we will be providing some great tips and strategies on one, how to reach out to elected officials, and then two, some great messaging to make that outreach successful. We're joined by Mike Ziri from Equality Illinois, as well as Jonathan Lovitz from the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Before turning it over to them, I want to do a final check to see if we have Commissioner Kevin Morrison here with us. Okay. So with that, I'm excited to go ahead and turn it over. First, we will hear from Mike Ziri, and then we'll hear from Jonathan Lovitz. And so, Mike, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Mike Ziri here, he, him, his, from Equality Illinois. And Jeremy, thank you so much for inviting me today and just for our great partnership with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. And Jeremy and I go back a couple of years, so really just glad to see you in the role of executive director and the great things you've done at the Chamber. And excited to be on a panel with Jonathan and to talk about advocacy and, how you can make change with policymakers. And it's very appropriate that we're doing this today, that I'm doing this today, since I am in a lovely hotel in Springfield, Illinois for legislative session. So perfect timing. Before I just want to jump into it, I also want to give a shout out to the Chamber for its partnership on a recent bill that we passed in Illinois here, Senate Bill 1730, which is a bill to enhance demographic data reporting for LGBTQ corporate board members. So really excited about that to understand corporate board leadership, to help be able to enhance it in Illinois and ensure more LGBTQ representation on those corporate boards. So really excited by your partnership, Jeremy. Thank you so much for that. It's probably no surprise that I think advocating to legislators is important, since it's what I do every day. But it is so critical that you as leaders in the community raise your voices to these elected officials. And Jeremy asked me today to share just a few tips on how you could do that. What are the best ways of doing that and to be effective? Of course, any conversation of talking to elected officials should start with knowing who your elected officials are. And so when it comes to the state legislature, one of the resources that I use to help folks in Illinois find out who their state legislators are is I use the State Board of Elections website. And I'm going to drop in the chat a link that you can use to find out who your member of Congress is, who your state senator is, who your state representative is. That could all be changing, in a few weeks based on the new legislative maps, but this will be updated with that information. So it's just a good link to at the very surface, just find out who represents you and who you can advocate to. And when it comes to advocacy, just a few tips I want to share. One, always tell a story. Always tell a personal story, why something matters to you, because that's what legislators want to know. They want to know what matters to you at the personal level. They can get the high level data from me if I'm advocating for a bill, for instance, but what I can't give is those personal stories. And I have seen someone's personal story really move legislators who we thought were immovable. The example I always like to use is, a few years ago, the legislature passed a bill to modernize the birth certificate process in Illinois. And there was a young trans man from Springfield who was a page in the state Senate, but he advocated to his state representative, who was a Republican who was going to be a no on the bill. But this young man shared their story with the legislator twice over like a 3-month period. And in the end, that legislator voted yes because of that personal story. And we know that because the legislator told us that they would have voted no had it not been for that, for this individual sharing their story. Now, advocacy doesn't always work out like that, but that's a great example of why telling your story is so important, and connecting with values. And when you tell your story, you are the expert of your own experiences. No one can tell you that your experiences are wrong or inaccurate or incorrect. And so I know it can be intimidating sometimes to talk to elected officials, but you know, you are the expert of your own experiences, your own knowledge, and your own story. And so you are powerful when you tell that story. If you don't know the data behind an issue, or you don't know a fact, it's okay to say I don't know and follow up. That's totally okay. Or have someone like, Jeremy could follow up with that person, or I could follow up with them. So it's okay to say I don't know, but don't ever let anybody tell you that your story is wrong, because it's not. It's your experience and your story. And just a few other tips I want to just jump into. I said, tell a personal story. You are the expert of your own experiences. Don't worry if you don't have all the answers. It's okay. And one really key thing I also say with advocacy, always follow up. Always follow up, whether that's a thank you letter or providing the information they requested. And even after you send the thank you, keep checking back in. Keep checking in, and because it serves two purposes. One, that elected official knows that you still care, but also if you constantly check in and they get to know you, you could become the point of reference for them, or a point of reference on that particular topic. So maybe it's supplier diversity. That's something that they get to know you. And when they have a question or an issue about supplier diversity, hopefully they'll turn to you, and then you can provide your input from your perspective. And then probably the most important thing when you're advocating to a legislator, make the hard ask. I have seen many meetings where advocates and like seasoned lobbyists will go into a meeting. They'll have a great meeting. They'll talk about an issue, but they'll never ask the policymaker, will you vote for this? Yes or no? And so a legislator can skate by and say, well, they never asked me for my vote, so I never told them. And the issue is, if the meeting goes well, I've seen where advocates can become under the impression, well, the meeting went well, so of course they're going to be a yes. Well, did you ask them to be a yes? No. Well, then it was just a good meeting. So always make a hard ask. And I know that can be uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me initially when I started this work, but you always have to ask the yes or no. Always put them on the spot. It's their job. So always make the hard ask. And then, the other question I sometimes get is, what's best to meet with policymakers? And I think of state legislators, would it be best to meet in their district office or in the state capitol? And I guess it depends at what point of the year you're in. If it's now, you're not going to be meeting with them in the district office because they're in Springfield. But that also means that if you get to go to the Capitol, which most people aren't going to right now, but if you do get to go to the Capitol, you'll probably get 2 minutes of their time versus 30 minutes if you meet with them in their district office, where they are less pressured, where there's less things pulling around, where there's no committee hearings, where they're not rushing to session or not. So I would always encourage you, as you're trying to develop a relationship with your legislators, to do that by meeting with them in the district office, and then continuing that relationship, building that relationship throughout the other parts of the legislative session, the legislative calendar, including participating in lobby days. And I want to be cognizant of time. So the last tip I will say is, get to know not just your legislators, but get to know the legislative leadership if you can. So that could be the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, the Republican leaders right now. Get to know key staff in the governor's office. Get to know key agency staff at the state agencies, for instance, or I see Kevin Morrison at the county board as well, at the county level as well. And also, I think it's really key to try and meet with and start developing relationships with leaders of the Black Caucus, the Latinx Caucus, the Women's Caucus in the legislature. So that way you can make sure as many legislators and leaders know and understand the issues you are advocating for and fighting for. because you really want to help build that base of knowledge across the legislature as well. So those are just a few of the tips that I always like to share, but always, of course, always make that hard ask and always tell a personal story, because that's where you really connect. So I'm going to kick it over to Jonathan to share some more.
Thanks, Mike. So before we kick it over to Jonathan, we're very fortunate to have been joined by Cook County Commissioner Kevin Morrison. So excited to have him share some brief remarks as we continue on with the discussion. And so with that, and sort of just based on where he's now following to the discussion, Commissioner, we're now going to challenge you with sharing sort of one strategy, tip, or idea that you have for folks to reach out to their elected officials as well.
Well, hello, everyone. I thank you so much, Jeremy. And I just want to wish a happy 25th anniversary to the organization. It's incredible to be with you all. But first, I've got to give a round of applause to Mike Ziri. What he just explained, I hope you all were taking notes. He gave incredible advice. And I often tell Mike he's one of the most influential gays in the state of Illinois. He really does magic for our community. And so we are all incredibly grateful, and none of us have not lived through the impact and influence of Mike Ziri on the state of Illinois. So Mike, thank you for the great advice. I'll begin quickly by telling, I have to follow his advice and give a quick personal story. So what interested me in public service was not the discrimination I face as an LGBT individual. It was actually the discrimination I saw my ma face during my youth. My ma owns and operates a small business. And as a kid, some of my strongest memories were hearing customers ask for the owner, her coming to the front of the restaurant, and the customer looking at her and saying, "Excuse me, I asked to speak to the owner." Because they could not believe that a woman owned and operated their own small business. And it was instances like that that compelled me to want to do whatever I can to help better the situation for all communities. And so I now sit on the Cook County Board. I represent the Northwest suburbs. I believe Jeremy wanted me to give advice on how you could reach out to legislators. Is that correct, Jeremy?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, first and foremost, the link that Mike put into the thread could definitely be helpful, but I would just press you even further. I'm not sure if all of you are located within Chicago or within the suburbs, but knowing all of your representatives is critical on the county level, on the municipal level, as well as on the state and federal level. We all have different authorities. And at the county, we've been working really hard to really fight for our small business community, especially after this past year. After COVID-19, I'm praying that all of you are keeping safe and healthy, and as are your loved ones. Pressing your local officials to support small businesses is critical, especially in a time of economic devastation like we saw over the past year. At the county level, we've been pushing forward 2 stints of assistance for renters and mortgagees, some of which actually fell and went to our small business community as well. We, in utilizing the PPP assistance that came to the county, right now we have the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and so that there is funding available that right now is accepting applications currently. So if you're a restaurant owner and need assistance and have been affected by COVID, make sure to get your application in soon. Earlier this year, we also were doing $10,000 grants, as well as low interest loans for the businesses hardest hit here in the county. This is just another chief explanation for why you should know all your local bodies of government, right? When I was knocking doors, most people had no idea what a county commissioner was. And if you didn't know your county commissioner or that you had a county government, how are you going to know the services that are being provided, especially in a time of great need like right now, where we are giving renter, mortgagee assistance, where we're giving low interest loans, where we're giving grants to businesses hardest hit. And so I would say just go on, either use the link Mike sent through or go on Ballotpedia, find out who your local legislators are, get to know them, ask them pressing questions, shoot every single one of them an email and ask them what are they directly working on right now to help the small business community and to help the LGBT community as well. Jeremy, thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we look forward to continuing working with you. Awesome. So with that, Jonathan, thanks so much again for joining us. And so we'll turn it to you.
Excellent. Great to see everyone. I think this is the longest in all my years at NGLC. I haven't been to Chicago for an event. So get your vaxes, kids, because I want to come visit. I miss the city so much. But great to see you all, and congrats on a huge anniversary year and all the great work. And I send best wishes from the NGLCC nationally, as well as my home in the great city of Philadelphia, where this topic has become particularly personal, because I am now not just I'm not just a advocate working with legislators. I have recently become a candidate for the State House. So this is, I hope to be on the other side of this conversation soon. But I echo everything Mike said about making it personal and making it about, you know, and you hate to make things sound transactional, right? But this is about making it a win for all sides, especially for those, if Democrats are in the majority or minority, as we are here, for example, we have to work with all sides to get something done. And so we have to say things like, hey, I'm not inviting you to my wedding. I'm inviting you to do business with our community. So like, that's as far as I need you to go with your LGBTQ acceptance right now. Beyond that, it's up to you. But the state's economy depends on you getting this right. And that's how we're able to bridge some of these conversations, like, and say things like red or blue, everybody sees green, and your district has X number of voters who are also likely to be LGBTQ. This many people are likely to be business owners. This is the potential tax revenue implications. Like, the more we can remind people about the bigger, broader issues at stake and let them know, particularly if you're fighting on an LGBTQ issue, the advocacy or the sort of equality element is the icing and cherry on top. We'll celebrate that. Don't you worry. You don't need to put that in your newsletter, Republican Senator. We'll do that. You just need to let people know that you passed something that was pro-jobs or pro-voting rights or pro whatever it is. You spin it how you need to. But one of the other things that I really loved how Mike framed about following up, it's so important. And also giving, a takeaway. And I don't necessarily mean you don't need I was just speaking the other day to the House Dems Policy Caucus, and they've got a 20-page brochure and all this stuff. I'm talking about a YouTube video. Something where you send it over to them saying, here's a recap of everything we talked about. Here's the important issues. Here's a personal story. Like you said, here is the testimony of an outstanding young trans person of color who this will benefit. You need to send this around, because that helps them make the argument to their colleagues saying, hey, I just watched this and I learned something. Give it 30 seconds, because then you don't need to go through schedulers. You don't need to go through firewalls sending your PDFs. You make it personal and you talk about things, especially with video, you can make a different, the whole last 3 minutes can be all the same, but the intro can be a different one for Senator X and Representative Y and Council Member Z. Each one can say, hey, I ran the numbers, and in your district, passing this can help X number of people create Y number of jobs, or whatever it might be issue du jour. So I think it's a video is invaluable. And the other thing too, and I borrow this from, as I often do, a line poached from the West Wing for fellow fans. There's a line in there that's made as a bit of a joke, but I think it's dead serious. Elected officials have agendas, sub-cabinet people and staff have goals. And have ladders to climb. So they're the ones that can help, the deputy assistant for policy one day wants to be chief of staff. So the more you can help them find a way to win and do a great thing with you that benefits everybody, everybody wins. They look great, their boss looks great, and you had a huge victory that's going to help your cause. So, as in all things, and you're all business owners, that when you're trying to close these deals is what's in it for each other. So help underscore that case in the legislative arena. The other thing that's also really important is galvanizing the diverse stakeholders somebody wouldn't expect to be an ally on these issues, i.e. we're talking about things like LGBTQ business inclusion throughout the state, as Jeremy and I saw firsthand when testifying in front of the aldermen and women of the city council. The pushback is almost always, and around the 28 cities and states I've passed these laws in around the country, doesn't matter how informed they are on the issue, the questions are always around, doesn't this just benefit gay white men because we have Black contracting codes and women contracting codes, et cetera, et cetera. And you then say, you might think that, but I'd like you to hear from this first generation Black trans woman business owner who has been told, oh, you're too Black for a gay space. Your trans status makes you too uncomfortable for the women's business spaces. Like, these things that they have been told help shatter not only the stereotypes, but broaden the frame of thinking for these legislators. And then to couple that with bringing in voices from the Hispanic chamber and women's chambers and Black chambers of commerce, assuming we're talking about an economics issue, and saying, yeah, we can't forget that we have LGBTQ members of our team, or, of our family as well. And who better to advocate for them than people who know this lived experience? That's why we're going to work together and change this mindset of, oh, there's only so much pie, and helping one community means we lose our piece. No, collaboratively, we can bake more pie. Because especially when we're talking about things like public dollars, it is all of our money paying for everyone's contracts. It is in our best interest that they be more diverse and more competitive, because that lowers prices. So that means more money left over for kids' schools and firefighters and everything else that we all share, which goes to things like, the Masterpiece Cake Shop argument, which is, sure, you don't have to sell me cakes, but then if the store burns down, you don't get to call the fire department that I pay for. Oh, is that uncomfortable for you? So, making people realize that you have to zoom out from your own issues and realize a broader public frame of reference is really helpful. And that's not everyone's comfort zone. Particularly in America, we're really good at only seeing our universe, especially if we don't have a lived experience outside of it. So bring in the experts they'll listen to, bring in those other chambers, bring in academia, bring in our case, it was amazing to have corporate partners on board, because they are the job creators. They are, some of the largest tax revenue generators in our cities and states. And they can say what things like equality and opportunity and data collection and all of the things we're fighting for mean for them, and why it's a public sector imperative as well. So bring in those strange bedfellows, because they often have the most valuable testimony to share, because again, it comes from a place of, rooted in the things that we all as communities share, a stronger tax base, a stronger hiring base, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess sort of the last thing I'll add on this, in case we have some questions, is, as Mike said, know your stakeholders. There are some really, really scary statistics out there that upwards of like 70% of Americans do not know the name of a single council member, let alone state legislator, let alone state senator. And, you talk about things like boards and commissions, et cetera. That is scary. Because especially those of us who are from diverse communities and are advocating for that, we are all letting far too many straight white men over 65 dictate the future of a majority minority country. Period. Show up. So I would, and also remind them of that, if you're in some of these hearings about, we see it all the time, the future of women's healthcare being discussed by panels of white men who do not have uteruses, yet somehow have expertise in the subject, remind them this panel is not it. And to be agitating like that, saying, if you really want to hear perspectives, we can bring them to you. And if you don't want to hear them, we'll make sure the media knows that you didn't want to hear the perspectives that are actually going to be influenced by this kind of policy and legislation. Remember too, the media is looking for stories, and they're looking for positive stories, especially in Pride Month. We have enough out there about, especially still recovering from the injustices of the Trump era, where we're still building back as a community, and now fighting these trans sports bills and bathroom bills that are rearing back up and whatever it might be. But then there's also positive things like Richie Torres's bill that will finally add LGBT economic tracking data to the federal credit programs. Because remember, all of our small businesses need bank loans to survive. but 35 states still say it's perfectly legal to say we don't give money to your kind. So we need to be tracked. LGBT people right now are in the same economic position women were in 1974 when you needed a husband to get a credit card 5 years after the moon landing. So we are still pushing back on that narrative that we are viable and worth being tracked in an economic context, despite our $1.7 trillion GDP impact. So drop those numbers like a sledgehammer on these people and say, we are thriving despite what is being done to our communities. And when you add on women and people of color and Hispanic and women and disability and veteran-owned businesses, that's nearly $10 trillion in GDP power in this United States. Collectively, we can move any mountain. So be of service to one another in other communities, and then ask those communities to be of service back to us as we're advocating. And with that, I'll be quiet.
That was great, Jonathan. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully, I mean, those were like all the talking points there. So I hope between Jonathan and Mike, you were able to, you have a full phone conversation or everything that you need to move forward from today. Jonathan, I love, again, where you really brought out and talked about really speaking to our impact, what we bring to our communities. Remember, people that we hire, people we pay personal, we pay business taxes. Like, our elected officials should know who we are. They should be aware of the impact that we're making in their local communities. And so definitely it is, as Mike said, is definitely it can definitely be super uncomfortable. I remember last year with Jonathan going before the city council, that was my very first time having that engagement, and it was definitely super uncomfortable. But it was one of those things where fortunately we had some great partners there, as you'll see in our conversation at 11:45, having, again, those people who can really speak to some of these issues, who can say, hey, I am a Black queer woman. This is the impact that certification has for me and my business. Having partners like Vince Williams at the Chicago Minority Supplier Development Council saying, hey, this is what happens when we bring in LGBTQ businesses to the conversation. And so again, please be sure to join us for the keynote session at 11:45, where all those things Jonathan just talked about, we'll be able to touch on those in the next discussion. I do want to give folks a final chance to ask any questions if you have them. Again, feel free to drop something in the chat section or to virtually raise your hand. So Commissioner, since you're still here with us, I'm wondering if there's anything that you heard from Jonathan that stood out to you in terms of, oh yes, that's something that you should do, or that's a really good message that would resonate with elected officials. Anything that sort of stood out that you'd like to sort of wrap up for us?
Well, I just want to commend Jonathan on all that he had the opportunity to share with us. Especially when we're talking about LGBT certification, that's one area that I've been entering in many conversations, and is one line of investigation that we're doing at the county. I would just say it has to link back to the personal story. So when you're talking to your local officials, explain your struggles as a business owner, being part of the LGBT community, whatever sets you apart that could be influential and moving, and might be able to find a way to connect with the individual that you're communicating with, I think is going to be critical. And so, I would also say, if your body of government is not making the moves you want to see, press them on that question. I've been talking to my counterparts on the county board about LGBTQB certification for the past 2.5 years since I've been on the board. But reaching out to your own county commissioners and helping uplift my voice is going to be critical as well. So I would just say, keep pressing them, keep asking, keep having those conversations.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Okay, it looks like you explained everything, all of you, so well that folks are prepared tomorrow to start their advocacy work. And so I'm excited about what this means for our community, because I know that great things are coming our way. So huge thank you to all of you for joining us. Again, Mike, thank you for, again, as you all just heard Commissioner Morrison say, Mike's been doing the work for our community for a good number of years. And so thank you so much, Mike. And definitely, we're definitely proud to partner with you on the corporate board opportunity, and look forward to hopefully being able to get more LGBTQ folks appointed to some corporate boards here throughout Illinois. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck to you as you move forward with your opportunity in running for office. We will definitely be rooting for you from here. And Commissioner, thank you again for joining us and staying on throughout today's conversation. And so thank you so much. And we hope to see you all in the future.
Thanks, friends. Good luck, everyone. Have a great long weekend. Keep up the great work.
Take care and keep healthy out there.
Woohoo!
Thanks everyone for joining for this session. I will now stop recording.